серия събития, които са посветени на ролята на градската зеленина. На днешното събитие само ще очертаем темите, които се надяваме май месец, когато епидемичната обстановка ще ни позволи да се съберем на живо, да можем да обсъдим в по-голям детайл и да можем заедно да търсим и намираме и прилагаме решения за увеличаване на площта и ролята на зеленината в града. С това съвсем кратко откриване бих искала да благодаря на хората, които ни гледат и са се регистрирали за днешното събитие, както и на панелистите, които се съгласиха да вземат участие в днешната дискусия, също и на официалните лица, госпожа Фандъкова, господин Гайслер и госпожа Петибон. Благодаря ви и заповядайте.
Добър ден на всички. Изключително ми е приятно да се видим, макар и от разстояние, и да дискутираме една от най-важните и може би най-приятните теми, но не винаги лесни, каквато е темата за зелените пространства в градовете. Уважаеми господин Гайслер, уважаема госпожо Петибон, уважаеми участници, зрители, колеги в тази конференция, изразявам първо своята огромна благодарност към Фондация Конрад Аденауер и посолството на Франция за партньорството при организирането на тази конференция. С нея целим да насочим повече внимание върху ключовата роля на градовете в адаптирането към промените в климата. Признателна съм и за времето, което доктор Ямамура, доктор Витанова, доктор Джонсън, доктор Мае, професор Руд и господин Белинсън отделят днес, за да ни информират за най-новите тенденции и практики в развитието на зелените площи на градовете. Когато говорим за борбата с климатичните промени, обикновено акцентираме на горивата, на възобновяемите източници на енергия, на енергийната ефективност, а когато говорим за чистотата на въздуха, подобряване чистотата на въздуха, се спираме основно на отоплението и транспорта. Доста говорим по тези теми и, разбира се, работим по тях. За мен обаче не по-малко важен е ключовия фактор, който помага за изчистването на въздуха и създава приятна, уютна и човешка среда, а именно зелената система на града. Затова, когато разговаряхме с господин Гайслер и получих уверение, че за пореден път Фондация Конрад Аденауер ще подкрепи провеждането на дискусия с граждани, с учени, с неправителствени организации, с моя екип обсъдихме и решихме, че темата ще бъде именно зелените пространства в града. За съжаление се наложи тази дискусия да я проведем отново онлайн, но имам уверението, че това ще бъде първата от поредица дискусии, така че се надявам да имаме възможност в бъдеще да се видим и на живо. В моята управленска програма един от най-важните акценти е именно чиста и зелена София. Развитието на зелената система, опазването на зелената система. С тази среща заедно поставяме началото на серия от дискусии, посветени на зелените градски пространства. За нашия екип е важно да дадем начало на тази инициатива именно в годината, в която София беше избрана за финалист в инициативата на Европейската комисия "Зелена столица на Европа". София постигна второто място благодарение на съвместната работа с всички заинтересовани страни, разбира се, с гражданите. И заедно с моя екип, с екипа на Зелена София, благодаря на колегите, благодаря и на колегите от направлението екология и зелена система. Ние продължаваме да работим за тази инициатива. Предстои да кандидатстваме отново и да защитим нашата кандидатура и следващата година. Така че с госпожа Елица Панайотова и нейния екип имаме още много работа и вярвам, че и тази дискусия ще ни помогне. Зелените пространства и земеползването формират един от 12-те индикатора, по които се измерва напредъкът на европейските градове по пътя ни към устойчиво развитие. Достъпът до зелени пространства е определящ за стандарта на живот на хората. Богатството на природен парк Витоша, просторните паркове, които има София, по-малките градини в сърцето на града, междублоковите пространства в кварталите и дърветата по булевардите и улиците определят идентичността на нашия град. Не е тайна, че когато имаме гости, едно от първите впечатления е именно зеленината, така да се изразя, в нашия град. Целите, които си поставихме и изследваме, са няколко. Да съхраним съществуващите зелени площи, да развием количеството и качеството на тяхната зелена покривка, както и да създадем нови паркове и градини. И може би най-важното – да включим гражданите в този процес с тяхната активна подкрепа, която получаваме и досега. Още от началото на моето управление последователно създадахме няколко конкретни програми в тази насока, които преследват и двете цели. От една страна развитието на зелената система, от друга страна включването на гражданите. Ще ви запозная много накратко с няколко от тях. Първата програма беше създадена по моя идея и нарекохме Зелена София. Тя е за облагородяване с помощта на гражданите на междублоковите пространства и кварталните градинки. Това е именно програмата, която позволява да включим местната общност, кварталната общност не само в развитието, а и в поддържането на градините. Граждани, неправителствени организации, читалища получават предоставени материали от нас и реализират със собствен труд свои проекти. Инициативата се прие и продължава да се приема с много голям интерес. За 10 години с наша подкрепа и пряко участие на кварталните общности създадахме близо 1500 зелени пространства близо до домовете. А средствата, които общината отделяше през тези години, увеличихме от 100 000 лева в началото на половин милион лева в последните години и този бюджет, въпреки всички трудности, запазваме. Преди няколко дни само приключи изпълнението на програмата за тази година. 180 граждански проекта по програмата бяха реализирани. Съгласно одобрените проекти, освен, разбира се, цветя, храсти, озеленяване, т.е. затревяване, бяха засадени и близо 700 нови дървета близо до домовете на хората. И най-ценното отново ще кажа, че хората, които участват пряко в труда си, имат и ангажимента да се грижат и занапред, да полагат грижи, да работят заедно с децата си близо до домовете им. Втората програма, която създадахме преди няколко дни, тя беше много амбициозна и включи изключително голям брой хора, представители на бизнеса, беше проекта Новата гора на София. В квартал Суходол, съвсем близо, непосредствено до старото рекултивирано вече сметище, с помощта на повече от 7000 доброволци за 6 сезона засадихме тази гора и изпълнихме този проект. През следващата година планираме да продължим инициативата, като създадем нова втора гора на София в село Негован. Предвиждаме на терен около 137 декара да засадим около 70 000 широколистни фиданки. Надявам се отново да се включат много хора. Те наистина обичат тази инициатива и аз благодаря на всички, които досега се включиха в нея. Третата изключително важна програма, както за мен, надявам се за всички, това е програма свързана с зеленото възпитание на най-малките, на децата, учениците. Нея нарекахме Моето зелено училище, Моята зелена детска градина. За тази година по тази програма са засадени над 1000 броя широколистни дървета в дворове на детски градини и училища. За мое съжаление, заради пандемията не винаги успявахме да включим голям брой деца и ученици, но пък за сметка на това те имат грижата да продължат да се грижат за дърветата, които засаждат. И това създава възможности не само за училището и детската градина, а за целият квартал. Най-новата програма, с която включихме гражданите директно при разпределение на част от бюджета на София и започнахме миналата година, това е програмата София избира. Тази година второто издание на програмата е посветено на зеленото. Нарекохме София избира зеленото. Използвам случая да анонсирам, че все още могат да бъдат подавани проекти, а срока е до 31 декември. Бюджета на програмата е 1 милион лева. И най-мащабната програма, с която ще ви запозная, това е програма, която реализираме от 2 години. Започнахме пилотно, работим по нея заедно с районните кметове. Това е програмата за облагородяване на междублоковите пространства, така наречените кални точки. Много неприятен термин, но той, за съжаление, съществува в много квартали или в почти всички квартали на София. Облагородяването на междублоковите пространства е и сред най-новите мерки, залегнали в комплексната програма за подобряване качеството на атмосферния въздух в столичната община. Според данните и анализите, един от основните източници на замърсяване с фини прахови частици в столицата, около 25%, е почвата и прахта по улиците, така наречената ресуспендирана прах. В тази връзка, още преди 2 години стартира пилотна инициатива в 3 столични района. Това бяха Овча купел, Красна поляна и Надежда. С старта на инициативата бяха облагородени 7 обекта и инициативата се прие отново изключително добре. Ефектът е видим. Продължихме през 2021 година. Бяха възложени за изпълнение дейности на общо 49 обекта в 19 района на столичната община. Планираме инициативата да продължи да се разшири през 2022 година, като за целта е извършена актуализация на списъка с инвентаризираните кални точки, нуждаещи се от облагородяване, като отново работим по тази тема заедно с районните кметове. Предоставени са данни от 21 района на общината и са идентифицирани общо 131 обекта с обща площ около 92 декара. За всяко от тези пространства е посочена точната локализация, площа, подходяща облагородителни мероприятия и индикативна стойност за реализацията им. Доста сериозна, разбира се, е прогнозната стойност. Ние ще заложим в следващия бюджет средства за изпълнение на тази програма, но заедно с това търсим и други възможности, освен бюджетни средства. Предложили сме в оперативната програма Околна среда, която приключва, т.е. започна тази година и приключва 2027, да има такава възможност. За сега имаме разбирането и подкрепата на Министерството на околната среда. Най-голямото предизвикателство пред всички тези усилия обаче, безспорно е фактът, че както София, така и другите големи градове, не само в България, но и в цял свят, продължават да растат, да се разширяват. Все повече хора идват в градовете ни и това, разбира се, е свързано с много сериозно и активно строителство. Затова обсъждаме и търсим възможности в рамките на развитието на големия град, заедно с бизнеса и гражданите, да прилагаме различни модели за задължителното озеленяване на сградите, така че да можем да разрешим този конфликт, който в момента наистина е доста сериозен. Сега, когато сме изправени пред заплахите от климатичната криза, тези задачи придобиват истинска спешност. Ние трябва да продължим трансформацията на София, като приоритизираме решения за зачестяващите екстремни прояви на времето, които всички усещаме, от засушаване и топлинни вълни до интензивни валежи и наводнения. Над 70% от населението на Европа вече живее в градове и ние трябва да се погрижим за сигурността и комфорта на хората при една затопляща се планета. Но всички ние дължим тези усилия на хората, но най-вече на децата и на всички, които ще дойдат и след тях. Зелените площи са важни не само като начин за справяне с климатичните проблеми, но са важни за биоразнообразието, за намаляване на топлинните острови в градска среда, за осигуряване на въздушни течения, за пешеходно и велосипедно движение, намаляване риска от наводнения и, разбира се, за психическото и физическото здраве на хората. Затова в днешната дискусия очаквам да бъдат очертани предизвикателствата, които стоят пред градовете по цял свят, свързани с икономическия аспект, с реализация на публично достъпната зеленина. Днешната дискусия и предстоящата конференция очакваме да представят и идеи и практики за придобиване на частни терени за паркове. Това е една тема изключително актуална и много трудна за решаване в нашия град, както и за различни форми на финансови приходи за техните собственици. За да постигнем всички тези цели, е важно да обединим усилия на ниво национални институции, на ниво европейски институции. И отново ви благодаря, че всички вие сте с нас днес. Благодаря отново на Фондация Конрад Аденауер, на Посолството на Република Франция. Нека днешната среща даде начало на една ползотворна дискусия и партньорства, които да ни помогнат да осъзнаем важността на зелените пространства в градовете и тяхното съхраняване и развитие. Да намерим нови решения заедно. Благодаря ви.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good morning to everybody. It is a great pleasure for me to welcome you on behalf of Konrad Adenauer Foundation to this online conference. I will be very brief. I will make only a few short remarks, but I want to express my profound thanks to the city of Sofia for taking the initiative to organize this conference, this project, and in particular to the mayor of Sofia, Ms. Jordanka Fandokova. It was your plan, it was your initiative. And well, I can only say that Sofia wants to be a green city, and that is the vision of Mayor Fandokova. And that is also the name of a comprehensive plan, which consists of a large number of projects that have one thing in common. They will make Sofia a more environment-friendly city for the benefit of its citizens and visitors. It is a plan which already shows results. In the European Green Capital competition, Sofia was a finalist. The mayor mentioned it. And this is the first Southeast European city ever, a big success. And I have no doubt that it is not a question of if, but when Sofia will become Europe's green capital. To support this ambitious goal, our original plan was to organize a big conference on the topic of urban green, with several panels on all aspects of the green development of the city, and experts and participants not only from Bulgaria, but from many different countries. The current COVID situation does not permit such a live event to take place, so we decided to postpone it. It will take place next year during the French presidency of the EU presidency of the Council of Ministers. And I'm very pleased that it will have the support of the French embassy. It is my pleasure to welcome the Deputy Head of Mission of the French embassy in Bulgaria, Mrs. Stephanie Petitbon. Thank you for your cooperation. And of course, I would like to express my profound thanks also to all the other partners who support this event. We cannot have a live event at the moment, but nothing will stop the implementation of Sofia's ambitious plans until the crisis is over, and we will keep developing it further to become even more successful. Therefore, I'm delighted to welcome some distinguished experts from several countries who will today share their expertise with us on urban green and climate, waters, air, biodiversity, and health. I'm looking forward to the speeches, and I'm convinced that this online conference will provide beneficial and valuable results. Konrad Adenauer Foundation thanks you for your cooperation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Gessler, for inviting me to participate in this meeting. I'm glad to represent the French Embassy. So I would like to start with a few words on the importance of the subject of sustainable cities. Climate change and the damage to biodiversity are major challenges. They have been known for a long time. The urgency of the situation has been highlighted again at the COP26 in Glasgow. We know we have to implement the Paris Agreement. France is committed to these challenges by mobilizing the financial resources of the international community through the series of high-level One Planet Summit meetings initiated in 2017 by President Emmanuel Macron. These challenges arise first and foremost in cities. Cities are centers of greenhouse gas emissions, but they are also places where the most vulnerable populations are concentrated. And it's also in cities that the greatest opportunities and potential are concentrated. According to the United Nations, the size of urban centers has doubled in 40 years. The world's urban population is expected to double again in the coming years, reaching 68% by 2050. For Europe, the urban population is expected to reach 84% of the total population in 2050. In partnership with the Association of Bulgarian Municipalities, the Bulgarian authorities, and Bulgarian cities, the French Embassy has been promoting for many years a vision of sustainable cities for the future. Among the many challenges facing cities, and in particular Bulgarian cities, air quality is an issue that seems essential to us because of its impact on the health of inhabitants. Confronted with the climate and health emergency, many European cities are reacting. And these cities are proposing increasingly ambitious solutions. If I may, I would like to give you two examples of two French cities. The first of these cities is Paris. Paris, which has taken a number of radical decisions in this area. First of all, the use of chimneys has been forbidden. Secondly, numerous actions have been taken in the field of transport, with the massive development of public transport, the setting up of a bicycle rental network and cycle paths. This is called Vélib, maybe you know it. The banning of old polluting vehicles put in the market before 1997, and the banning of diesel vehicles planned for 2024. Finally, the most emblematic measure is the speed limit of 30 kilometers per hour in the whole city of Paris. The second city I wanted to tell you about is Grenoble. Grenoble, which has been selected by the European Commission as the European Green Capital for 2022. It is the second French city to receive this distinction after Nantes in 2013. The city of Grenoble is the third most population city in France. It is situated in a valley in the Alpes mountain, and yet it has achieved its ambitious target of reducing its greenhouse gas emission by 25% between 2005 and 2016. Its policies on climate change mitigation and adaptation, urban mobility, land use, water management, energy performance, and quality of governance received top marks in the European Green Capital competition. In addition, the city has renovated its green spaces and created new parks over the past 15 years. Grenoble was the first French city to adopt a climate plan in 2005. To improve its energy performance, it has implemented a code of conduct involving local partners and observers in the assessment and monitoring of energy consumption, sustainable energy production, and greenhouse gas emissions. The city's climate plan has set ambitious and realistic targets to reduce energy consumption by 40% by 2030 and 50% by 2050. It is continuing its action with an ambitious tree planting program and making unused space available for urban gardens. And finally, because the quality of life of the inhabitants is the most important element, Grenoble has created many eco-neighborhoods. The Flaubert eco-neighborhoods is one of the best examples of innovative eco-neighborhoods in Europe. I would like to finish by talking about Bulgarian cities, because of course, Bulgarian cities are not left out. I would like to congratulate the city of Sofia for being a finalist for the year 2023 in the European Green Capital Competition. This is a great news. This competition also has a category for cities with less than 100,000 inhabitants called Green Leaf 2021. And I'm delighted to see that this distinction has been awarded to Gabrovo for 2021. It is a sign of the importance of the efforts that have been made for the transition of this industrial region. In this respect, I'm delighted that the mayor of Sofia has been hosting this Green Urban Conference for several years, which has evolved over time and which addresses not only air quality, but all the key areas of the ecological transition in cities: urban mobility, energy transition and heating, water management, waste management, and biodiversity. I believe that each of the actors in urban green are bearers of solutions to make Sofia and Bulgarian cities greener, more sustainable, more resilient, and more inclusive. In short, cities where life is good. The French Embassy has been and remains at your side to promote exchanges, cooperation, and partnership to solve together the challenges of the city of the future.
Thank you all. Аз приключвам отново на български, заради цялата аудитория от хора, която ни слуша в момента. С това приключва нашата официална част и откриване. Много благодаря и на Френското посолство и на Конрад Аденауер, както и на госпожа Фандъкова и за времето и за инициативата за провеждането на събитието. И бих помолила в момента Райан Белинсън да представи панелистите и да започнем същинската дискусия. Разбира се, заповядайте.
Преди да приключим с тази част, тъй като виждам, че в чата има много въпроси и се радвам много, защото със сигурност предстоят много интересни дискусии, да кажа, че през цялото време на конференцията ще присъстват хората от моя екип, така че се надявам да стигне времето да отговорят на много от въпросите, които се задават. И разбира се, ако това не се случи, след това ще ги видя въпросите и ще се опитаме да дадем отговори на тях. Благодаря, Елица, и успех на конференция.
Благодаря ви. Въпросите, които искате да отправите и към панелистите, ще бъдат след това предадени на модератора на панела, така че в края на панела да може да бъде направена дискусия. Въпроси, ако има към официалните лица, ще отговорим след това, но всички въпроси ще получат своя отговор. Благодаря ви. С това, Ryan, the floor is yours, and thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Are you able to hear me all right? Okay, excellent. If you need me to change any audio settings, just shout at me in the chat. It's really wonderful to be with you all today for the Urban Green Conference. We had an excellent opening by our three distinguished hosts. So thank you very much for that. My name is Ryan Bellinson. I'm a Senior Research Fellow in Cities, Climate, and Innovation at the University College Institute for Innovation and Public Purpose. So it's my real pleasure today to moderate a discussion between a group of experts in the field related to urban green space, and the various connections between green infrastructure, green space, and broader social connections. So what I would like to do for us to begin this session of the conference is just to give a brief introduction and then introduce the panelists. During this session of the conference, there will be a Q&A session towards the end. Please put your questions in the chat and we will answer as many of them as we can. We're really hoping to have a dynamic conversation with you, the audience. So please put your questions in the chat and we will answer many of them, hopefully, if not all of them. So just to kick off, I want to ask the question of what is green infrastructure, urban green infrastructure? Is it simply physical spaces that have a bit of greenery that intangibly make a place feel better? Is it just about the kind of ephemeral parks, green roofs, sustainable or natural drainage? Or are there something deeper to what urban green infrastructure, green space is all about? In recent years, I'm coming to you from a university. In universities, we've been doing a lot of research in this area and understanding the deep, intrinsic, complex, and symbiotic relationships between what is traditionally perceived narrowly as green space, just as parks, just as a space for leisure, and understanding, reimagining those spaces as vital resources that connect everything that makes a city beneficial to live in and a site of economic production. So green spaces are fundamental from everything from environmental quality to biodiversity to public safety and inclusive economic development. They're a catalyst for creating alternative forms of value. And they're absolutely critical for climate adaptation and resilience, as well as for physical health and well-being. So there was just a couple of examples of the ways in which we're beginning to understand the real deep connections between green space and these other areas of urban life. There was a study that came out recently in the journal Nature that did research in Toronto, Canada, looking at what the effect would be of adding 10 additional street trees per residential block. What would the impact on an individual's quality of life be? And that study found that residents on those streets had their relative level of happiness increase comparable to someone that made an income $10,000 higher than them. There was an additional study that came out recently from NASA looking at cities in Denmark and found that young people that grew up with poor access to green space, urban residents with the least ability to access green spaces such as parks, were 55% more likely to develop mental and psychiatric health conditions in adulthood compared to other young people that grew up in parts of their city with high access to green space. So green spaces can have a lasting impression throughout an individual's life. And in the 21st century, what will a green city look like? Who has access to the elements that make up a green city? So something that has been increasing in recent years are what's known as POPs, private owned public spaces. These are often spaces within a city that are owned by a private landowner that has some type of what's called an easement, allowing residents or citizens to use that space. It could be a park on top of a building. It could be a park between buildings for particular parts of the day. So are green spaces just spaces that are really for everyone in a true sense? Or are they spaces that are being privatized and commercialized? We want in today's discussion to talk about some of these issues, looking at topics such as in cities across Europe, across the world, neighborhoods that have lower household incomes have poorer access to green spaces, fewer green spaces. We want to explore what the ramifications of this are, how these trends can be overcome, looking at the types of value that green spaces provide beyond just being beautiful sites that provide us with well-being and leisure. So today we have an excellent panel of guests from around the world. As you heard earlier, this conference was originally supposed to take place in person. It was going to be a large international conference. That's happening later next year. But this is a little appetizer. We have excellent panelists from around the world. I'll give you a quick introduction to them now, and then we'll have a bigger discussion altogether. So firstly, I'd first like to introduce Rebecca Lee Rutt. She is an assistant professor in the Department of Food and Resource Economics at the University of Copenhagen. Dr. Rutt is an assistant professor within the department, and her research and praxis engages with perspectives of and struggle for social and environmental justice and feminist political ecology, such as in relation to the implications of green space within European sustainability agendas, and is broadly inspired by the pluriversal degrowth movement. Next, we have Shinji Yamamura, who is the executive officer at the Nikken Seiki Research Institute of Japan. Dr. Yamamura completed his doctorate at the Graduate School of the University of Tokyo and is a permanent member of the Engineering Academy of Japan and International Council of Academies of Engineering and Technological Sciences. Dr. Yamamura is also a visiting professor at Zhejiang University in China. He is an expert consultant on smart city, low carbon cities, and environmentally friendly architecture and urban planning. We also have joining us today Joachim Maas, who's the European Commission Directorate General for Regional and Urban Policy, Policy Development and Economic Analysis Unit. Mr. Maas joined the Policy Development and Economic Analysis Unit of the Directorate General for Regional and Urban Policy recently. He worked as policy leader in the European Commission's Joint Research Center in Italy previously, where he coordinated the research on biodiversity and ecosystem services in support of the EU's biodiversity strategy. He also works as an expert for the UN's initiative on ecosystem accounting and led the work on ecosystem conditions. We also have joining us Lydia Vitanova, who's a researcher with the Nikken Seiki Research Institute of Japan. Dr. Vitanova completed her doctoral program in geoenvironmental science at the University of Tsukuba in Japan. She is an expert in urban climate, urban heat islands, ecology and environmental protection, and numerical modeling. She is a member of the American Meteorological Society, International Association for Urban Climate, and Royal Meteorological Society. She has numerous publications related to urban heat islands and the past, present, and future impact of urbanization on surface air temperature and human thermal comfort in Sofia. And lastly, we have Daniel Johnson, who is research assistant and SETSB Research Center coordinator at ESCP Europe and short-term consultant at the World Bank. Dr. Johnson, who is a short-term consultant for the World Bank and research assistant and coordinator of the SETSB Research Center at ESCP Business School Berlin. He has numerous publications in international journals. His research focus lies in the field of environmental economics. Dr. Johnson completed his doctorate at ESCP and his MSc in Water and Environmental Management from Leibniz University of Hanover. So I'd like to welcome all of these colleagues onto the panel today, and thank you in advance for your participation and knowledge that you'll share with us. So the way the panel will work for the rest of the session, there will be some questions that each of these panelists respond to for about 5 minutes each to expand and deepen, add nuance to this topic of urban green and show us some of the different dimensions of what urban green means. Then we'll have a discussion amongst the panelists, and at the end of the session, there will be that Q&A session. So again, please put your questions in the chat and we'll answer as many as possible throughout today's session. So the first question I'd like to ask to Daniel, I'd like to begin with you. So if you could begin today's session by describing the concept of ecosystem services and its role in inclusive, sustainable economic development.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much also for the introduction. Yeah, ecosystem services are simply the benefits that we humans perceive from nature and natural capital. So if we've already reflected on several issues leading up to right now, and we've talked about many different issues, many different problems that we have, especially in cities, whether it's climate change or maybe even stormwater management or air pollution. And ecosystem services, specifically of green infrastructure, urban green, parks, etc., I like to think of them as problem solvers. So we have the issues of air pollution, and we know that, for example, trees aren't just trees, they're also great at relieving some of this air pollution issue that we have in cities, especially in dense urban environments where we have a lower exchange of air with surrounding areas, and we have many vehicles, fossil fuel production, etc. These all lead to high concentrations of air pollutants. But by having more trees, we can also begin to reduce that load on the urban residents. And when we look at, for example, rainwater management, urban areas are typically have very high concentrated flows of rainwater, and these land on sealed surfaces when we don't have much green. And when we introduce more green in the cities, then we can absorb more water, either through the tree itself or temporarily store the water. And therefore, a tree isn't just a tree, it also supports our efforts in addressing these different challenges. So it's solving these problems, and this concept we can call ecosystem services. So for example, green can help reduce air pollution. It can help manage stormwater. It can help also improve the aesthetics of cities and the quality of life. Like you said already, that people living further away from urban green are also having a tendency to have mental issues. And these sorts of things are providing us with, these sorts of nature and cities are providing us with these services that we can directly experience and acknowledge. And specifically from my field, we like to value these in monetary ways, for example, willingness to pay, or looking at directly how much reduced pollution we have in the city, whether it be through rainwater pollution or whether through air pollution, and quantify those in monetary terms. And then we can also compare with the costs of such things. So we know, we've already talked about how costly it is to purchase private lands in order to have more urban parks. But on the flip side, we can also estimate the benefits of such ecosystem services in monetary terms and weigh those costs with the benefits on a societal level to understand what sort of value society is gaining across all of these different urban issues that we have when we have more urban green versus having more urban gray, for example. And that's how I understand ecosystem services in terms of trying to look at the future in terms of sustainable development. And a lot of times issues in cities are highly dependent on economic status in different areas of the city. Most poor individuals live in areas where these issues are even higher. And more importantly, it's more important to address those areas, specifically with urban green, because those were where the benefits are seen or are realized to the highest extent in order to obtain this sort of inclusive, sustainable development. So that would be my quick answer to your question.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Daniel. It's a huge topic, so I appreciate you distilling some of the really important aspects of it in a condensed opening, and we'll be able to break out and explore some of those aspects in greater detail later in the discussion. Sure. So now I'd like to bring in Lydia, and Lydia, I'd like to ask you if you're able to describe the urban heat island effect from your extensive work, and particularly how cities like Sofia might be impacted by the phenomena of the urban heat island effect, and what the types of solutions could be to reduce the negative consequences that exist with the urban heat island effect.
Well, thank you very much, Ryan. First of all, I would like to thank for the great opportunity to attend this great event, and Sofia Urban Green. And also I'd like to thank to the Sofia municipality and Mayor Jordanka Fandakova and the great member of the Green Urban and Sofia for this opportunity. So first of all, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Lydia Vitanova from Bulgaria, and I have graduated University of Tsukuba in Japan. And my major is related to the urban heat island and urban climate, especially. So before I explain about what is the problem in Sofia, just briefly introduce this phenomenon, urban heat island. Actually, this is a regional, or let's say a local phenomenon that is related to the increasing of the surface air temperature in the urban area compared to the suburban area. And actually such a phenomenon we can see in the, especially in the sunny sky day without precipitation, and especially in the morning when we have sunrise, and in the evening in the sunset. So related to this phenomenon, I have several publications related to the impact of urbanization, past, current, and present impact on the urban heat island and the thermal environment in Sofia. And based on this research, I have found that in Sofia there is strong heat island, more than 4 degrees, for example, compared to the past and current and future. So there is some reason for this increasing of the temperature, and actually one of the reason, this is impact of anthropogenic heat. And actually anthropogenic heat based on the building sector, in the building and transportation. This is first one. And second one, this is increasing of the land use change, or increasing of urbanization in Sofia. So regarding to the solution, what we can do in future, I think first thing that is good solution is that we have to consider about energy consumption and this anthropogenic heat, how we have to make in balance, and especially from the buildings and transport. This is first that we have to consider. Second thing is we have to consider for the balanced, better urban planning in Sofia. For example, we consider some not so well used area, for example, in the central area. We consider for better planning, and such a compact, better planning could be also impact positively on the temperature in Sofia city. And third thing that I think is connected to the today topic about green urban, this is we have to consider about urban green space in Sofia. So this is related to the public space, this is related to the space between the buildings, related to the park, related to the some area that is for some for rest area. And I think if we have if we make some plan, a future master plan, or we have to understand the future future increasing of the urban, Based on this, we can calculate and we can estimate the impact of urban, not only related to the urban heat island or increasing the temperature, but we also can understand how this increasing of the urban can impact of the urban health, of the heat disorder, for example, or the lifestyle in the citizens, etc. So I think that this phenomenon is related to the increasing of the temperature is related to also to the green area, and everything is connected. So we cannot say that only we focus on the urban green, but I think we focus on many aspects, and we include many problems, also social problem included. And based on this, we can improve the urban environment in Sofia city. Thank you very much. This is my answer.
Thank you very much, Lydia. I really appreciate it. And there's some interesting examples that you give that we can get into further during the discussion, that Sofia having a strong urban heat island effect that could increase temperatures by up to 4 degrees. That's pretty extraordinary. But then considering the systems approach, where one of the key solutions is reducing energy, well, and in buildings in particular, if temperatures, no, go ahead, please.
Yeah, and actually one thing I would like to mention here that I missed, that actually location of Sofia is very important for this high temperature. Maybe some people will just curious why so strong heat island, and because Sofia is located in the surrounding mountain in Sofia Valley, I think this also impact of the increasing on the temperature. However, because of the climate, we don't have so humid climate. Some maybe citizens cannot feel directly so strong heat island, but for example, compared to some Asian tropical country, when we have very humid climate and people suffering for the heat stroke or some heat disorder, I think we have to consider in future this problem, and also green spaces and parks would increase, and what is the impact of this green space on citizen and urban lifestyle also.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. So next I would like to bring in Joachim, who is going to add a different context to the conversation, but very much related. So without further ado, Joachim, could you tell me, is there a relationship between biodiversity and urban development? And why should cities prioritize, care about their influence on the local biodiversity? And if you have any examples of initiatives that cities have taken to improve biodiversity, that would be excellent. So over to you.
Yeah, well, thank you. And also thank you to the city of Sofia for inviting me. But I would like to start saying that it's nice to be back, even if it's in a virtual way. But in 2018, we, the European Commission and the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences, we organized actually in Sofia a conference on urban biodiversity. And that was supported by the Bulgarian presidency of the EU at that time in 2018. And I think one of the key conclusions of that conference on urban biodiversity was that that there is this relation between biodiversity and urban development, be it that urban development has to be sustainable. That means in terms of transport, in terms of actual residence development, in terms of use of pesticides, and environmental impacts, and so on. So that's key, obviously. This relationship is sort of multidimensional. It's not only in terms of science, species diversity, and sustainable urban development, but also in terms of policy and implementation. A key conclusion was that if cities want to enhance their urban biodiversity, that requires truly a sort of multi-level governance framework where different levels of government support each other in achieving a better biodiversity in cities. It starts off obviously locally, but also countries, national governments, and the EU can contribute. And in that context, I also emphasize that one of the key objectives of the EU biodiversity strategy is to green cities in Europe. It's also an important objective of the European Green Deal. And one of the initiatives that the Commission is taking is to set up this Green City Accord, just like the Covenant of Mayors, where cities can voluntarily subscribe and commit to enhance green spaces and enhance biodiversities in their city. So policy is clearly important, but implementation as well. Implementation meaning how can we make cities more diverse in terms of species and habitats and trees, birds, butterflies and bees and so on. Citizens have an important role to fulfill there. It's maybe something we can discuss further during this meeting. Also because citizens can have a direct impact on local biodiversity, other than, or in contrast to climate change, I would say, where the role of a single individual is hard to quantify, but a family, as an individual person or as a family, you can actually increase biodiversity in your city by, if you have a small garden, you can organize it in a biodiversity friendly way, enhance bees by putting bee hotels and enhance pollinators. You can do a lot for urban birds. It starts with individuals, but also architects there is substantial guidance on how architects can create more greener buildings. They can build in nest sites for house martins and sparrows and so on. So it starts often with very little concrete projects and plans, up till where cities themselves can start thinking of breaking or opening up, making soils available for flowers and native species, enhancing tree cover in cities, thinking of mini forests. So there's a lot of specific concrete actions that cities can actually take to enhance the biodiversity. And I think what's in for cities is essentially the fact that you shift from becoming a problem. Urbanization and unsustainable urban development has often been regarded as a problem to global biodiversity, but you start from becoming a problem to becoming a solution. How can cities contribute to loss of biodiversity in a positive way? And I think that's a very important message where cities can subscribe to. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Excellent place to leave us. Moving from this space of looking at cities as the kind of key problem makers in the sphere of climate change, which is a little bit separate but related to where we're speaking. Cities are the largest producers and are the most responsible for greenhouse emissions, but what can they do to be a part of the solution? So it's good to see that this is a similar space that practitioners and residents are able to help think about how they can really make cities a part of solutions. Next, I would like to bring Shinji into the conversation. Shinji, if you're on the line, please turn your camera on. And what I would like to ask you to speak about, add a little bit of nuance to, is the concept of smart cities. And I'm really curious, are there existing or emerging smart city solutions or technologies that you see have a role in enabling cities to meet their biodiversity and green space ambitions, and how smart city initiatives might be part of urban solutions? to these challenges that the other panelists have spoken about. So Shinji, if you're on the line, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much for your kind introduction, Mr. Mia. And thank you very much for inviting me to this fruitful conference. So the smart city concept is not just concept now. So the smart city is now moving to the implementation phase. So on my firm, Nikken Sekkei has engaged in over 50 projects about the smart city in the world. So let me introduce my firm briefly before the topic about smart city. So my firm has founded over 100 years ago, and we've engaged in over 30,000 projects in Japan and in the world. In Europe, the representative one is a football stadium for the Barcelona FC. So this is my firm's design. And therefore, about the smart city concept, the smart city concept includes the comprehensive issue for Mary. There are two portions. The first one is about the quality increase topics, and the other is about the energy issue. So the smart city methodology realizes the actual CO2 reduction on the every categories, not only the energy building category, transportation, energy supply system, resource system, such as water supply, drainage system, and garbage system. And in Japan, the smart city project has just started. Only 4 projects have started in 2011, but now the government is now engaging over 100 projects. And in Southeast Asia, so the Indonesian government is designating the 100th smart city in the country. And in China, so around 200 projects is now proceeding. And also in India, so the Indian government says about the 500 smart city is now proceeding. And such kind of smart city implementation is affected by the development of ICT or digital transformation. So because for about the energy reduction in building, so about the 15 or 20 years ago, so I was in building design engineer. So, but it is very difficult to realize over 50% energy reduction by using these days technology. But now we can realize over 50% or 60% energy reduction in building. And at the same time, for about the in terms of the management phase, so the area energy management system can realize additional 10 or 20% energy reduction. So such kind of the management methodology is very useful, not only for the brand new building or brand new city, but also the existing traditional city. That improves the fruitful green area. And so for about the green design, the greenery design is also a very important methodology for the smart city implementation, because as you know, the green has a multiple role for the physical or psychological effect, and also mitigating heat run phenomena. So, and by using ICT or IoT system, so we can accelerate the effect of greenery by using smart city methodology. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shinji. Now I'd like to bring in Rebecca. And Rebecca, just for the audience's sake, I know that you're having some care duties today, so no worries if you have to run out on us briefly. But I would like to bring you into the discussion and ask you if you're able to describe the concept of green gentrification. That's something that's important to this discussion. So I'm interested if you're able to describe that. And we also spoke earlier about the potential of high quality green spaces to improve property value. So if you can also discuss whether this topic is related to the presumed benefits of rising property value.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ryan, and also to all of the organizers for inviting me here and convening this important event. It's true that I have a little one that's sick here at home, but I think I'll be able to get through the next 5 minutes without disruption. I think I'll start by answering the question around connections first, and introduce my sort of entry point to discussions on urban green spaces in general, which includes using an environmental justice perspective. And I assume that some of you here today are familiar with that. Environmental justice is, generally speaking, a term that has emerged over several decades, firstly and still within community activist spheres, but also by scholars and activists, to shed light on disparities amongst human groups in relation to exposure to, but also decision-making on various environmental phenomena. So put more simply, it evokes sort of classic social justice dilemmas of distribution of, in this case, for instance, environmental bads, but also goods like our valued green spaces in the cities, and procedures in terms of things like meaningful participation and representation in decision-making. And we tend to assume that we tend to assume that urban green spaces are universally good, that they produce multiple benefits for the public. And of course they often do. And I am a huge fan of biophysical green, where I live in Copenhagen. They give so much to me. But an environmental justice lens reminds us that nothing is necessarily always good for everyone. So in the case of urban green spaces, we also, I believe, need to ask questions around, just for instance, their distribution in our cities in relation to the city's demographics, right? So where are these being established, and how does that relate to some of the key indicators amongst human groups like wealth or immigration status, or whatever socioeconomic and cultural attributes are of relevance to a particular context or a particular city. And similarly, we can ask distribution questions around resources to maintain our urban green spaces, right? Which ones are getting support while others fall to disrepair? And these questions also can be applied to thinking about who gets to decide around where they are, but also what sort of amenities that they feature. And all of this, for me, largely shapes who actually is going to benefit from these spaces. And this matters when we think about the fact that it's often public money going into the establishment of so-called public spaces, and therefore should arguably be available to the benefit of everyone in the public. But also too, this matters because pretty much every society is struggling with issues around disparities amongst its population, and perhaps it's based on class or gender or race or ethnicity or age or physical capabilities, and all other aspects that tend to determine essentially how much power certain groups have. And of course, this matters in deliberations about urban green spaces if urban authorities decide to pay attention, and moreover, if they are aspiring to more just urban futures. And Ryan, you mentioned this term green gentrification and how that relates, not least to the sort of idea that rising property values are a universal benefit. And this relates very closely to discussions around environmental justice. Green, or sometimes called ecological gentrification, is the process by which so-called greening processes, and for our purposes today, we can think about the development of biophysical green spaces in cities like parks or green walls or street trees or urban gardening, how that can lead to increased perceptions of desirability of these places for living. And that drives up, of course, property values and rents in contexts where housing is commodified, where regulation for housing access, what some people call housing justice, is weak or non-existent. And some people understand gentrification as an improvement process in cities, but I use a definition that also recognizes the outcome in some places, whereby you see an increase not just in wealthier or more resourced residents, but also the concurrent driving out of lower income renters and the lower income groups in our population. We see these trends in the so-called liberalization of the housing sector in a lot of cities around the world, as we have here in Denmark, especially since the early 2000s. And this has gone part and parcel with the uptake of neoliberal ideology since the 80s and 90s. Here in Copenhagen, we've seen housing prices continue to skyrocket now for around 15 years, excluding, the dip around the financial crisis in the mid-2000s. And Copenhagen's current sustainability and livability agendas, which feature some emphasis on biophysical green and blue spaces, are contributing to this, intentionally or not. And this can then be understood as another environmental injustice. So for me, the simple question is and remains, based on what I said a few minutes ago, who are these desirable spaces actually for? And I think I'll stop there, but if anyone wants to talk a little bit more about that, I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rebecca. I think it's a challenging topic you raise, but also very important. We can look to, on a global scale, something we're all living through right now, the distribution of vaccines to combat COVID-19. We see when these sort of public goods, you mentioned that green space is often publicly funded. Same thing with vaccines. They often have been created, the ones that we're using in Europe have been created using public funds. But when the decision-making around who gets those vaccines, are they available for the wide distribution of public good, or are they distributed based upon profit maximization? It doesn't lead to the intended effect. And like we see now with the new variant that's emerging, by not using these resources that we have for the public good, it creates harms for everyone. So I think the similar process can take place with green spaces if we're not careful with how we legislate the management of them. Are they really adding broad public good to the city, to communities within that city, or are they just for certain groups of people? So now what I'd like to do is open up the floor for all of the participants to engage in a little bit more of a discussion. But before that, just a reminder, please continue to put your questions in the chat. We're going to answer them shortly, but please put those questions in so we can get to them. But just to kick off, panelists, feel free, if you have a response, to do so, or if you don't have a response to the question I raise, no worries. But just to begin, I'm curious. All of you spoke about the different connections between green space with transportation, air quality, mental health, etc., broadening out the conception of green space and its relationship with other domains. So I'm curious, Joachim, from your work, Daniel, from your work, others, if you have examples of cities that have done a good job of looking at green space from this broad holistic perspective and how they've tried to value green space, not just as something that is a park that in planning law or zoning code, there's a certain percentage of land that has to be used for green space, but something that has a broader value, and have been able to start integrating these different forms of valuing green spaces. So I'm not sure if anyone has examples they'd like to share, maybe where this has worked well, or where it's gone awry on the flip side, if you have those.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. This is Joachim. Well, with the Joint Research Center, which is the science service of the European Commission, we have been working the last 10 years with dozens of cities in Europe, always with the question on how can we map and assess biodiversity, green spaces, ecosystem services, and how can we actually use that to inform policymakers with their urban planning, or also citizens in case they have specific questions about issues that we have discussed today. And there's plenty of examples. I'm just going to name one, which is a city in Belgium, Antwerp. It's a major city. It has a major port, and substantial problems with green spaces. There's a shortage of green spaces. It delivers several problems, including, for instance, flooding and increased flood risk because of a lack of the permeability of the soil. And as part of the project that we did with them, the city and researchers, they work together on a tool that integrates information, spatial data and information on biodiversity, on ecosystem services, on locations where green spaces are private and public, that is accessible to everyone, that is at very high resolution, I think 10 meters resolution, which is important for cities, and that helps, first of all, the cities, the planners in cities to look at where should we open up streets to allow water to infiltrate better, and how can we actually convince citizens to do the same. And many citizens are insufficiently aware of the functions of green space. They have been raised in traditional ways, so let's pave everything, let's build wherever possible. So how can these tools also help convince citizens to support more sustainable management and organization of the city? There's plenty of other examples, of course, across Europe, also mainly funded by DG Research, with projects on nature-based solutions. And if needed, participants and people who attend this meeting can certainly contact me for websites and information. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there other panelists that want to respond to this question?
Sure, I might have another example from this perspective of more rainwater management, but for Berlin, we have this interesting case that Berlin is actually a city that would have been more like a swamp if it wasn't ever built up. So we actually do retain quite a lot of rainwater, and that's one of the issues that we have to deal with when, for example, we have these very strong rains that are coming every few years, and much of the city is sealed. And so what we have is a rainwater charge and on the amount of sealed surfaces. And when we take up measures that reduce the amount of sealed surfaces, we then get a reduction of that charge. So for example, property owners now have the economic incentive to put a green roof on their property, or have more green parking lots instead of a paved parking lot. And therefore, these sort of small incentives, it's a small financial incentive that goes over the course of several years. So you can look at it in terms of your own personal long-term planning. If you're planning a new construction site or remodeling your own construction, your site you're building already, then you have these small economic incentives that then add up when we're looking at the entire city. And in this sort of way, it's now almost not even possible to build a new building without a green roof. This is one small way that's, and this is not just in Berlin, there's also many other cities that currently do this as well. And I think that's also a great way not to maybe directly value all the different benefits, but by addressing just one problem, stormwater management, you're also opening up the field to address several other issues at the same time.
Well, thank you, Daniel. That example of Berlin is really helpful, and I think it might relate. You mentioned green roofs. It might relate to urban heat island effects. So I have a question, Lydia, but also Shinji, Rebecca, if you want to answer this question as well, around the co-benefits of green space. So looking at the different ways in which we value our urban nature, not again just through the lens of it being a valuable space for leisure activities, but other activities as well. Lydia, when you are working on urban heat island solutions, are there ways that you think about infrastructure such as green roofs or other types of natural infrastructure that can create solutions to the urban heat island effect, but might also have other benefits, wider benefits to a property owner, to a resident, to a building user or land user, or the city writ large? Are there co-benefits that exist to any of these solutions?
Thank you very much, Ryan, for the question. Yes, I think that as I have described it, when we have some problem, we cannot say that this is the directly this is the problem. Everything is connected, and actually related to the problem with heat island increasing the temperature, as I have mentioned, that not only related to the increasing the energy on anthropogenic heat or increasing of the urban area. But I think this is, if we have this balance in the urban space in the city, of course, everything will be this balance, also the life of the people, citizen, and also the climate and energy and etc. So I think that when we consider about urban, this is related to the building capacity and the building structure, and also with transportation system. And as you have described in your question, I think one of the problems this is the landowner in many cities. I think not only in Sofia, but I think that there is also a lot of cities that face such a problem. And I think that especially when we have some, actually in Sofia, there is a lot of green space, but maybe there is such a different problem. For example, a landowner, or we have to utilize more efficiently the space in the central area, for example, or for example, we have some balance between a new building area with some green area, or we can, for example, improve some green roof, green wall also, let's say, in the building. And actually one of the way we try to control this landowner or in these green spaces. For example, we explain and we make some benefit of this landowner. For example, tax exemption or reducing the tax, or for example, they have to understand some public space or park or something, how can be useful. We can, for example, attract the tourists or attract some people for resting, for relaxing. And actually, there is many ways, as Dr. Yamamura have explained about smart city implementation strategy, and also this is including reduction of the CO2 emission. So I think there is several ways we connect not only urban heat island, but we connect a different kind of approach in order to increase green space and also to make beneficial for the landowner in Sofia. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. You raise an interesting point around the need to engage with landowners to be able to articulate the kinds of value that these green infrastructures can provide, and provide education and that brings me, Rebecca, to some of what you have spoken to. Other panelists also feel free to answer these questions. But I'm curious from your work for green infrastructure investments that are made publicly or privately to promote a broad social benefit. Are there ways from your work that you have seen cities either successfully or not so much as struggling to bring together the complex group of public sector organizations, private landowners, private organizations, community-based organizations, in order to support inclusive forms of green infrastructure development that don't lead to the types of green displacement or green gentrification you spoke of earlier?
Yep. A couple of examples come to mind, and I bet many people here today on the panel and beyond have some examples that they maybe have been involved in themselves as coordinating or even as participants. But one thing that comes to my mind, first of all, is that, in general, we've seen a trend over the last, 10 plus years and even longer than that, of course, several decades of trying to be more inclusive in processes of policy making and implementation. And that includes in urban planning and renewal and so forth, and urban development more broadly. And I think that trend persists in many places to greater and lesser extents. And then we can see how it unfolds in practice, also existing along a spectrum of more and less meaningful to various groups. So one example that comes to mind has to do with a little park just around the corner from me. It is under half a hectare. You might think that is insignificant, but it actually is a very important park with symbolic meaning to the neighborhood. And there were tremendous clashes between residents and the municipality and the police as the enforcement wing of the municipality in the 80s, when the municipality was trying to undertake a very top-down agenda of renewal for this neighborhood. It was, aiming to demolish and reconstruct, and that wasn't what residents were hoping for. They wanted to see areas around the neighborhood renewed, like the buildings themselves being improved rather than destroyed. And also the same kinds of issues around the very few open green spaces that existed. So fast forward to the 90s, and this little park, and even actually, I guess I could say the early 2000s, this little park was now slated for renewal itself. It didn't really fit in with the municipality's vision. And in light of the tremendous clashes of, the decade and a half before, the municipality, in its sense, quite novelly started to introduce resident dialogue. And they really struggled to reach certain groups in the community. And I don't need to name all of those groups, but there's always a range of actors that are better equipped with time and resources and confidence to show up to some of these spaces, and then others that are less so. The municipality did their best, and they renewed this little park, but the outcome was very unsatisfactory to most people. What went wrong? A number of things. Despite their good attempts at participation, the constraints of time, for instance, and resources, kind of delimited who they could reach and the quality of the discussions that could unfold, the options that were presented for those that did try to show up and do their best for their community, what they could choose amongst. There's this practice in landscape architecture where, often you invite, for some reason, 3 is the magic number, 3 landscape groups, and they come with their artistic renderings, and then the people have to decide, in this case, it was residents together with the municipality and some experts. So it was around 2014, another process went underway to again try to fix this park and bring it into the vision of safety and security and sustainability that the municipality was developing for itself. And they engaged a group who did things very differently. And I would say this isn't innovative. This is stuff we already know. It's the things that we also, it's how we want to be treated if we're invited into a space. It's simply taking the time to do it slow, not coming with preconceived ideas and prescriptions, listening to problems, and then trying to iteratively develop some solutions in response to that. And when you come with a justice perspective, you're also trying to attend to those that are historically on the margins of decision-making, and whose interests around public spaces are historically less represented there. And therefore hearing those and bringing them meaningfully into the physical outcomes that we see in the cities.
Ryan, can I add something here?
Because
what I fully agree with Rebecca, and again, we are doing a project with 12 cities across Europe, including Sofia, with colleagues from Sofia Plan. The project is called Biodiversities, and it really investigates how cities, municipalities can engage in a dialogue with citizens on urban green spaces. Because I mean, it's often the case that less privileged groups don't have a voice. Certain planning is going on, but maybe with the discontent as a result of a full neighborhood. So how do you engage in a dialogue with different groups, also with schools? How can we motivate people to enhance green spaces in their neighborhood? How can we motivate them to get engaged in citizen science activities like counting birds and insects and other things to help them also understand the problem? So I think, and actually this was a wish from several members of the European Parliament that asked the Commission to show practical cases of how citizens can be better engaged in the whole process on urban green. So also here, participants may find interesting results also for Sofia on our webpage. Thanks.
Thank you both. Oh, Shinji, were you going to jump in?
Yeah, so in terms of the greenery in urban area, so I will introduce the Tokyo metropolitan cities local law. So that is about the total flora area ratio. So as you know, the Japan is so very narrow land. Only 30% just only used for our occupancy. So especially the Tokyo metropolitan city is a very high density area. So the metropolitan city government set a very strict restriction about the total floor area for the brand new building construction. But at the same time, they prepare the flexible methodology. So if the developer prepares enough greenery area in the construction site, so the metropolitan government allows the additional total floor area. Under this methodology, you can realize the win-win relationship between government and the developer and also the citizen. So such kind of law or bylaw will be very effective to make a good relationship and also the accelerate the greenery area in urban area.
Thank you so much, Shinji. So now I'd like to open it up a little bit broader and start bringing in some of your questions. So again, if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we will answer as many as possible. So the first question I'd like to ask is from Ilyana. And she's interested in urban agriculture and gardening. This is something that got spoken about earlier. And what she's asking is whether it's possible for the municipality to support free spaces or areas within the city for urban agriculture and gardening that can be used by everyone interested in these types of activities. So for those of us like myself, I live in a apartment block without green space. Are there ways that municipalities can provide green space to residents who don't own their own, to be able to grow their own food, to have a little spot within the city for peace and quiet nearby them. Do any of the panelists have examples of municipalities being able to create these types of spaces for residents?
I could respond here. We have a lot of gardening projects where I live. I'm a member of one of them too, and also a big fan. And the municipality has been increasingly supportive, providing some financial resources, small pots to give community groups the basic inputs that they need to get started. And that's really important. Money matters to, getting the kinds of soils that you want and the seeds that you want. And when it comes to space, we have very few green flat roofs, but the ones that are being targeted under a green roof policy that's at least 10 years old now. So we've been sort of trying to, latch on to the policy opportunities that are there, like a green roof policy, and bring the potentials of urban farming and gardening and so forth to contribute to that. And that can be a really important way of pursuing physical access, trying to find what policy opportunities are there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rebecca. And I believe that the municipality of Sofia has actually, through their Sofia plan, been able to develop a map with different plots for good urban agriculture. So I think just knowing where these spaces lie is an important first step to then be able to match up the sorts of finance solutions that you need, that you speak of, Rebecca, and so on. I want to then ask a question from Cremena, and apologies if my pronunciation of your names is incorrect. But Cremena asks a question related to urban heat island effects within blocks. I'm assuming this is referencing residential blocks, but blocks in Sofia, that it's a particular problem that exists in Sofia. So this is probably one for you, Lydia. If you have examples of other cities around the world or in Europe that have been able to create solutions or tried to create solutions around mitigating the urban heat island effect in residential blocks.
So I would like to ask about in the residential blocks, this means in the building or surrounding the building? So I couldn't understand this question. In the blocks mean surrounding area. If it's surrounding area, because actually urban heat island is try to investigate the increasing of the temperature in the urban area. So there are several solutions.
Actually, the question was about the specific Bulgarian issue of panel blocks, old-style residential buildings.
So I think that one of the problems that we have very strong heat island in Sofia, maybe is because of this concrete panel building, that actually material of the building is very important when we speak about heat island. So there is some solution. For example, if we make some environmental friendly building, I think that in Sofia there is a lot of old building, and actually this is one of the problems that we cannot remove just the building now in Sofia, but we can focus on future better urban planning in the buildings. And maybe for some of the solution for the old buildings, we have to, for example, we change the color of the building. For example, we cannot reconstruct the building, but if we change the color, this impact of the albedo in the city, this is one of the solutions. Another thing is we increase the urban area surrounding the building, and this could be impact for reducing the urban heat island. But in the building, what we can do, we can improve the energy. If we reduce the energy, also this is directly impacted to the reducing of the temperature. So this is one solution, is improving the energy consumption. For example, we use some smart technologies, etc. Second thing, we improve the energy related to the transportation, because as you know that, for example, we improve the transport, for example, improve the electric vehicle, improve the transport, public transport. And third thing that we can do for solution, this is increasing the green space. So everything is complex. So if we say that only building we have to focus, I think we have to focus many aspects. Am I answer the question, or I can input some another explanation?
I think you nailed it, Lydia. If not, the questioner maybe just pop in the chat what you meant, and maybe Lydia can respond via the chat.
Yes.
I'd like to bring in, I think this is a question, Daniel, you'll be able to answer. Shinji, some of your work will speak to, but other panelists, again, feel free to jump in. Another question was around two potential nature-based solutions that Sofia, to the questioner's knowledge, isn't thinking about, but might be relevant. And these are artificial wetlands and sponge city. So I know in China, there's a tremendous amount of work going on around sponge cities, integrating that with the smart city concept. Artificial wetlands and sponge city also are deeply enmeshed with ecosystem service types of thinking. So if any of the panelists have experience with these solutions, if you're able to share those experiences, and for Sofia, if they wanted to think about adopting these types of solutions, what the obstacles you have seen with trying to bring the sponge city or artificial wetlands into urban planning has been.
Sure, I can start off with that. So maybe one example of how that works is, or how that looks like, we have in Berlin at the moment with a relatively newly built area of Berlin, and it's called Potsdamer Platz. And they actually have, there are several movie theaters, there's office buildings, there's residential areas. And this whole area is actually kind of revolving around the sponge city sort of concept. So there's green roofs, there's rainwater reuse, and there's also an artificial wetland. And they use all of the water that falls on that complex, all the buildings, all the streets, all the parking lots, it all is used. None of it is being put back into the municipal treatment system. So that's a huge plus. And with the artificial wetland, there's also a little bit of biodiversity involved there. There are some wetland plants, and there's a nice seating area, walking area around it, and provides a lot of scenic beauty to the area. But the issue with that is the primary issue is the lack of space. So like in larger cities, if there's already areas that are undergoing construction, then maybe there's a potential for this. But I think trying to implement such sponge city constructions are the biggest issue is just acquiring the space, and especially for whether it's an artificial wetland or there's other different types of systems for treating water in a more green way. They require a lot of space, and that's why it's important to not focus so much like just as one solution, one central solution, such as a wetland, but to also incorporate as a whole system across a larger area, other green ways. So whether it's having more trees or having more open drainage areas, or having what are called swales, or having green roofs, permeable pavement, all of these solutions working together then makes it possible to address this, whether it's rainwater or also like Lydia was talking about with urban heat. All of these contribute to the same goal. So yeah, that's just a couple points from my perspective.
Thanks, Daniel. Shinji or anyone else, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Bian. So in Tokyo, so I have designed a kind of sponge city area. So by using the greenery and also the water holding bricks that can absorb the rainfall and keep the water on the surface area, and that can contribute to mitigate the heat phenomena by evaporating the water. So for such kind of environment-friendly design, landscape design, and biodiversity design has conducted in a farm project, several farm project. Also, I don't know why the sponge city is so popular in China, but especially in Sofia or other European city, maybe such kind of water-friendly landscape design will be so very effective, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Shinji. I'd like to bring in another question from the audience. And audience members, if you have more questions, please continue to put those in the chat. This comes from Randustina. And Randustina asks, how should municipalities ensure access to suburban green areas for residents? As Lydia spoke to, there's a particular geography of Sofia, having close access to mountains in a deep valley. Cities are reliant on their rural surroundings, suburban surroundings, which often have high quality green space. And Randustina also says that there are currently big parks in Sofia that don't offer enough access to urban residents, and thinks there might be a lack of infrastructure to enable urban residents to access those suburban areas. So if any of the panelists have any experience in this area of municipalities supporting different types of presumably transportation infrastructure to enable access to green spaces outside of the city center. If not, that's okay. Okay, we'll move on. There's another question.
That one.
Oh, go for it.
Yes, I just wanted to say that it has been an idea of Green Sofia to make more visible and popular the access to the other mountains surrounding Sofia city, because now the Vitusha mountain is actually overexposed to attention from the citizens of Sofia, and there are a lot of other mountains surrounding the city with bus lines and also some routes already developed. So we were thinking of developing a map and making it popular so that people would also see that there are other opportunities and put less pressure to Vitusha and somehow turn their attention to the other mountains surrounding the area. So we'll be happy to have also other ideas, but this is one topic that we wanted to move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, I also want to come in here just for saying I think this is a very interesting problem and issue that I've never thought about it. I mean, what you often see is that cities have been mapping the access of urban green spaces to citizens. There is a WHO standard saying that at least there should be urban green of at least half a hectare in within 300 meters of where you live. But I mean, I think the idea to bring people to green in places where it is not possible to create urban green spaces is a really interesting one. I haven't thought about it yet, so I'm really happy that this is raised by the participants, and it's definitely something where we can look at. Thanks for raising the issue.
Great, thank you so much. Next is a question from Petar, and I think it's a really interesting question that was already hinted at by some of the panelists in the opening. But Petar is asking us to turn our attention towards the potential of degraded land areas. and what potential these types of land within the city hold for planting perennial trees, but just green infrastructure in general. If there are potentials that you see municipalities being able to leverage to look towards the degraded land, the former industrialized parts of the city, that might be able to be used effectively for green spaces. I don't know if anyone has examples of this.
Yeah, maybe just very short. I think we had wonderful experiences with the city of Manchester, who developed or redeveloped these brown spots into green areas. So I think that's an interesting source to find inspiration and so on. And I just also note that or bring to your attention that the European Commission is working on a proposal for nature restoration, so a legal proposal to restore degraded ecosystems in Europe. And I'm just say that also urban ecosystems will be considered, so that's in the pipeline, probably for adoption next year, but an initiative from the Commission on nature restoration, including degraded urban areas. Thanks.
Thank you, Joachim. I'd like to end with one final question, and this is about the different levels of government that are involved in green space types of decision making. So this is something that was spoken about earlier, that there needs to be different types of policy frameworks in place to enable cities, or at the neighborhood level, individual councils, to be able to take action promoting green spaces. How interaction can happen between a council, a borough, a neighborhood, with the municipality, with the regional government agencies, with national government, and in Sofia's context or European context, the EU. If there are examples of ways that cities are able to engage with the other actors that might sit outside of the city, but have a role in supporting green infrastructure and green space. Joachim, I think this is something you spoke to earlier, but I don't know if other panelists have examples of where there has been strong interaction between a municipality and other government actors to enable these sorts of projects to emerge.
Maybe it's just also useful to say that we see where cities are supported by governments nationally, regionally, nationally, or EU, where there is specific support, or where governments, regional and national governments, have a specific policy in place on urban green space, that those cities are actually greener than in countries where there is no such reinforcing policy in place. So it's really an important issue. How to organize the dialogue, find the funding streams and so on. I don't have immediate experience with that, maybe others of the panel.
Thank you, Joachim. If any other panelists want to answer, jump in. Otherwise, I'll move us along. Okay, so I would like to bring this part of the conference today to a close, and first give a warm, hearty thank you to all of the panelists. Your expertise today has been very valuable. I think we're able to start unpacking Sofia as a finalist for the European Green Capital Award. That green label, there's so much that sits underneath it. And the discussion today, looking at the various aspects of connecting green with other policy agendas within the city, but other questions surrounding access to green space, who owns that green space, how decisions are made around green space in an inclusive way, but also the nitty-gritty of how these spaces are financed, what the dialogues are between municipalities and other institutions. So again, thank you all so much. And I'd like to hand the floor back to Elitza, who will close today's session.
Very much, Brian. Thank you all for taking the time to really join us today for this discussion. It's, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's only the beginning. It's the opening discussion to outline the topics that hopefully we'll be able to discuss in further detail in May. I extend my warm welcome to all of you. I really do hope to see you in Sofia in person and to be able to discuss in further details of those important topics. We will be happy to send you a brief of the direction that Sofia is taking and the problems that we are facing and what we will be willing to discuss during the May conference. But I will be also very willing to engage more because with Lydia and with Joachim, they have been already more exposed to the Sofia problems, and I hope that they will continue looking into it. With Rebecca, we'll be having next week a look into the urban farming, and hopefully that will also get involved in the topics that we want to bring further. And Daniel as well, we hope to find common grounds to work with you together on finding solutions. I will switch now to Bulgarian for the people who are attending the lecture. Благодаря ви много на всички, които се записаха за участие и активността, която имате в форума. Надявам се, че наистина темата ви е интересна, защото тя е много важна и е важно да я разширим максимално, за да знаем за всички аспекти и ролята на графика зеленина и проблемите, свързани с нейното развитие и поддържане. В предстоящата конференция през май месец ще се надяваме да говорим повече и за различните модели на финансиране на публично достъпна зеленина и кои са ресурсите, които могат да се ползват, различните също модели, по които собствениците на терени, които са предвидени за публична зеленина, могат да получават обезщетение или финансов приход. Също така ще сме щастливи, ако в фейсбук страницата на събитието вие и предлагате също теми, които бихте искали да включим и разгледаме по време на конференцията. Надяваме се, че през февруари ще може да направим един кратък подгряващ панел отново с различни лектори и експерти от различни държави в България, за да продължим темата. Въпросите, които останаха неотговорени, ще получат своя отговор или директно по имейл, или на платформата на събитието, която ще остане отворена до конференцията през май месец. Искрено ви благодаря за интереса. Много се радвам, че толкова много хора проявяват интерес към темата, защото е важно да има и обществена подкрепа и разбиране и натиск също така, защото София прави неща, но има много какво още да направи, както всеки един град, и се надяваме съвместно и с хората, които участват в панела, и с експертите, които се включиха в конференцията, да може да намерим съвместно добри решения за подобряване на живота в нашия град и за борба с справяне с климатичните промени. Благодаря ви много. Thank you all once again. And we do believe we'll be staying in touch and see you in person in Sofia in May. Thank you very much. Благодаря ви. Bye. Thank you, Daniel. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you.